Oh, hold on. For some reason, my camera is just not showing up. What's going on, guys? I don't know why my camera's not here. Let me putz with this. I tested it beforehand, and it seemed to work fine, but now it's telling me that my camera doesn't exist. Cool. Just a moment, everybody. Hello, David. How you doing? Let's see. Let me try this. There we go. But it's delayed again. God damn it. This stream hates me. I don't understand. What the? I don't get it. Why? Unbelievable. Okay. I don't know why it hates me on Tuesdays. What's going on? It was all fine. I was testing it. It was good. I might end the stream and come back. I think just because the camera wasn't in, it didn't know what to do. So I'm gonna very briefly end the stream. Hey Alan, what's going on? Nobody go anywhere. I'll be back in like 30 seconds. Just a moment. Let me know if you can see me. I just closed OBS and reopened it and wrestled with the camera a little bit. It says I have no dropped frames, so hopefully I'm good. Can you see me? Can you hear me? I didn't mess with YouTube at all, so YouTube should have kept it going. I am visible. Am I audible? Can I be heard? Just visible. Or is there an audio component as well? Yes. Okay. Okay. So sorry, everybody. Beautiful. Thank you. The Tuesday stream is cursed. Thank you so much for your help, Alan and David. They did this to me last week, but I managed to keep my cool this week. Last week I got very frustrated because I'd gotten it all working finally, and then I think there were only a couple people left in the stream, and I just felt it pulled all the wind out of my sails. How is everyone doing? Welcome. Today is Tuesday. It is a glass. It is a green glass. Today is Tuesday, and it is an adventure prep stream today. Yes, that's right. Finally, I'm getting a chance to talk about my new game. I recently ended my sort of long-running one-shot, basically, is the way to think of it. I had a one-shot, like a birthday party one-shot that blossomed into a campaign that ran for almost 2 years. And it was fun, and I enjoyed it. It was very silly and low stakes in tone because the players all sort of knew they were playing one-shot characters the whole time. They're kids. They were like 13 to 14-year-olds. So it was a strange group anyway, but I finally kind of said like, hey, we've come to a natural conclusion. Do we want to continue with these characters because we've grown attached to them, or would we rather start over with a new campaign? And they've opted to start over with a new campaign. So we are here to run Heart of Ice. They voted for one of my like 4 adventure prompts, and one of them was Rime of the Frostmaiden, but kind of like reflavored and redesigned for their unique campaign experience. And so that's what we're gonna do today. We did our session 0 last week. I tried to have a stream about preparing that session 0, but of course OBS was not very compliant. It seems to be doing better today, so hopefully we'll be able to talk about this. We are now post session 0, and I'm basically trying to take the characters' backstories and ideas and incorporate them into as much of the plot for Rime of the Frostmaiden as I'm inclined to use, which is some non-zero percentage. Often what I will do with these like Wizards products is it helps me to have a lot of the world building stuff done already, right? That like all of the pieces are there, but I will usually rearrange them and reconnect them in unusual ways or unique ways for the purposes of this campaign, especially if we have these like sort of session 0 designed characters with backstories and things like that. So I have an idea for the basic inciting incident, and I know the rough structure of Rime of the Frostmaiden as well, although I'm pretty sketchy on specific details of how it's supposed to go down. But that's all for later. We're going to talk really briefly about the rough summary, and then we'll get into each one of our 5 characters and talk about, you know, what we know about them so far, what we still need to establish, and then how to kind of interweave them. There are a few like kind of hanging threads that I really don't know how to tie together, and so I would love some help trying to brainstorm some of that. And then if we get through that and we still have time, I want to talk about how we're going to tie those things into the plot. How are we going to, like, I'm basically picking a different inciting incident than the adventure provides, and I want to try to figure out a way to take that inciting incident and then slide it into the actual adventure. I say I'm picking a different inciting incident, which implies that there is an inciting incident in Rime of the Frostmaiden. There really isn't. There's some weird thing that WotC likes to do where they basically just say every adventure starts in the most basic, boring way that an NPC that you just met tells you about the adventure hook, and maybe offers you like a very nominal reward. Right, it's like, hey, I'll pay you 100 gold if you do this, and that supposedly is going to lead you on the thing. I understand why they do this. They want to have, you know, a hook that a beginning dungeon master can get behind that's not too complicated, doesn't require too much work for them. But it's a very, like, Adventurers League mindset, which I think is creatively a little bankrupt. I feel like they have all these cool locations and all these cool ideas, but they often get relegated to the background. And so in my version, I'm going to pick a slightly more interesting, more complicated beginning, because these players have played before, and I am not a beginning dungeon master. So let's talk about the campaign summary, basically, and how it ties into Rime of the Frostmaiden as published. Spoilers, by the way, for anyone who wanted to play Rime of the Frostmaiden, you've been warned. So the campaign summary. As criminals sentenced to Revel's End, the characters are assisted in their escape by Auriel, the Frostmaiden, who then considers them her property and steers them towards her own chilling ends. It's a little bit inspired by my friend Vaughn, who ran a version of Rime of the Frostmaiden that incorporated Auriel as more almost like a patroness, sort of a villainous patroness, but a patroness nonetheless of the party. Revel's End is a location that is featured in the adventure, and it is basically like a maximum security prison, like a supermax facility on the edge of the world, right? Like kind of an Alcatraz, if you will, but all the way up in the frozen north. And it's such a fascinating location. I was really disappointed to discover that the adventure basically doesn't do anything with this. Like, there's one prisoner here you can talk to, but there's not really a lot of reason to go here. And it's such a striking image, and it's such a cool idea that I really wanted to center Revel's End, at least here in the beginning, as our inciting incident. And what's a cooler way to do that than to say, okay, all of the characters are prisoners, right? They're all being sent to the worst prison in the world because of some terrible crime they've committed. It immediately suggests to you, okay, why am I being sent there? How do we get out? It gives you an initial kind of scenario, and a prison break is like such a classic one, right? So that's the conceit. It's not particularly original, but I think it's a better use of Revel's End than the actual adventure provides. So one thing that Rime of the Frostmaiden does, this is a campaign that is inspired a lot by John Carpenter, right, and by Lovecraft and the Mountains of Madness. It's meant to be an adventure that highlights fear and paranoia and suspicion, right? They do a really interesting thing in the art for this game, or for this adventure, where they don't really show a lot of faces. It's people like with hoods on or with goggles, that kind of thing. Unless it's an NPC you specifically need to talk to, right? All of the kind of like all of the like background art or like mood setting art kind of has people with their faces covered. The idea being that nobody is really who they say they are, and it's sort of a world of suspicion and you know, mistaken identity and things like that. So you are encouraged to basically pass out these random secret cards at the beginning of the campaign, that each character gets one. They don't get to choose their secret. They basically just get a secret, and then they have to sort of incorporate it into their story. So during our session 0, I actually came up with 3 things they needed to establish about themselves before they did the kind of standard character creation stuff, right? So the secret was definitely one of them, and I wrote some custom secrets to swap out ones I didn't find particularly engaging. I did the crime, basically what crime did their character commit, and then I had them establish a connection to one other NPC, which is pretty standard, normal D&D stuff. So we went through those, and then from there, they got to pick things like, they have that in, Alan says that the secret thing is a lot like the Alien RPG. Yeah, Alien is also, I think, a good touchdown for this, right? That there's more going on. Again, it makes me think about Ian Holm, right? That there's like secret identities and like hidden agendas, and that's kind of the tone of Rime of the Frostmaiden, which is cool, and I'm excited about. And it's also what they voted for. Like, I presented them with 5 different campaign pitches, and they voted for Arctic Survival, which I'm interpreting as Rime of the Frostmaiden. So I have my 5 characters here, and the idea was basically that we are starting with the 5 of them on board a prison ship that is being sent north to Revel's End. In the book, Revel's End is kind of like a prison run by ostensibly good-aligned characters, the Lord's Alliance, which is basically like a loose confederation of quote-unquote good-aligned nations. You know, your mileage may vary on that, but that's kind of the intention. I ended up changing that in the course of the session 0 because I thought it'd be more interesting if the motives of the prison were a little bit more suspect, right? To get kind of an interesting, like, no one is here, no one is watching us, like, people are sent here to disappear. If they, for whatever reason, can't be executed in their home countries, you know, you can basically pay to have them imprisoned here in Revel's End, and they more or less disappear. Sometimes people are held here awaiting trial. Sometimes they are held here as the actual sentence itself. Sometimes they are held here because they're inconvenient, both to keep around and to kill. And so our 5 characters are each prisoners being bound there, and some of them have different relationships to each other. They also all have particular secrets, and they have all committed some kind of a crime to get them here. So we're going to go through each one of the prisoners. I did something that I thought was kind of fun. It may end up being kind of stupid in practice, and they may just discard it, but I thought it might be a fun way to start to introduce this idea of, you know, hidden identities and things like that. Each character, rather than having a name, is given a prisoner number. And the party A does not have access to each other's character sheets for reasons, and they don't know the names of the other characters. They only know their prisoner numbers unless they have a relationship and they would have a reason to know each other, right? So I'm going to be referring to them mainly by their prisoner numbers because I want to try to get that in my brain. There's nothing stopping them from just telling each other like, hi, my character is this, right? Or hi, my name is this. That's fine. They can do that whenever they want. I imagine they'll do that relatively soon. But it does give them the option of saying like, hey, maybe think about not giving out your identity right away. Maybe there's some power to be had in holding on to some secrets, right? It's meant to plant this idea in their head. So to start off, we have prisoner number 858, or 858. 858 is a goblin rogue whose real name is, and this they name themselves. Keep in mind, all of these characters were made by like 11 to 14-year-old boys. Squee the Impaler. So this is a goblin rogue, and their secret is that they are an infamous criminal. Not necessarily like a Robin Hood. It kind of could run the gamut of a Robin Hood to a Hannibal Lecter, right? The notion is that you are well known in multiple different powers and under multiple different powers and authorities across the lands. You are known as this famous criminal, and there's a chance whenever anyone meets you that they might recognize you. And if they do recognize you, there's a chance they have some relation to you. Maybe, you know, you have stole from someone that they care about. Maybe you think of them as a folk hero. It's really up to you what your opinion about them would be. So the idea here is that the player, for 858's player, wanted Squee to be basically an infamous assassin who has a reputation across the North for his particularly brutal killings, specifically his method of impaling his victims. I don't know how much the player is going to play into that, but that was their original idea. It was like blank the Impaler, and they ended up with Squee, right? I believe that Magic is doing a Dominaria set right now, and Squee, the famous goblin from Magic's lore, is back, so I have to imagine that's where it's coming from. And that's kind of the conceit. They told me why they were imprisoned. I mean, obviously it's something to do with them being an assassin, but I forget the specifics. I will have to check in with them on that. Crime. Assassination. Their relationship is to the next character, prisoner 561, also known as Poco. And we will cover that in just a second, but just to summarize here. During Poco's attempted coup of Neverwinter, Squee was hired to assassinate the Queen Regent, but ultimately failed. I know that's not the reason that they were imprisoned, because some time passed, between the failed coup attempt and when and this adventure, so they couldn't have been immediately imprisoned. But we'll talk about that in just a second. So that's our first character, kind of murder hobo vibes from 858, but we will see. Prisoner 561 is better known as Poco, and is probably the weirdest character in the party, although not necessarily the most narratively load-bearing. Poco is a kobold, and a kobold cleric, specifically of a law deity. They picked Anubis, which is interesting. So it's a lot of different pieces. Their secret is that they are a royal scion. They are basically like an inconvenient heir to specifically the city-state of Neverwinter. Which I think is really interesting, because if they got the secret first, and knowing that, they said like, oh, okay, I'm going to be a kobold. So in Forgotten Realms, Neverwinter is just sort of a large cosmopolitan city. It's one of kind of the powers of the Sword Coast. It's in the Lord's Alliance. But we're not really playing in the Forgotten Realms necessarily. Like, I'll be using terms and locations from there, but we're happy to change anything we need to. So in this version of of the Sword Coast, Neverwinter is clearly a kobold kingdom, or at least a kobold-run kingdom. I'm thinking, I know Neverwinter has like a volcano or something by it. I'm thinking that it might be sort of like an Iceland-style nation, where it is located far to the north, but it is like heated by volcanoes, which keeps it from ever actually being winter. So it's kind of like a little paradise. Maybe it's particularly attractive to dragons. You know, you could do something with the idea of this kobold-run paradise far in the north. I kind of like that idea, so that's sort of where I'm at right now. But the idea is that as a child, Poco was the heir to the throne of Neverwinter, right? This like exiled prince. And he was chased from his home by his aunt, this sort of clutching queen regent, sort of a Cersei character, right? Who was holding the throne for him, but then when he came into his majority, refused to give up the throne. And then he eventually, like, either she attempted to assassinate him or have him imprisoned or something. He managed to escape, and he lived in exile for many years until he was an adult. And at some point during this exile, that is when he found the faith of Anubis. So presumably he traveled widely into realms where Anubis is worshipped. I'm not going to stop him. Hey, what's up, Hunter Fox? It's a cool idea. I think Egyptian gods are interesting. I'm not going to stop him from worshipping Anubis if that's what he thinks is fun. But eventually then, he was used basically as a puppet by a rival nation. I'm thinking the city-state of Luskan, which is referenced in the adventure, and is kind of a sort of maritime, like, saber-rattling kind of pirate state. He was used as a puppet by a rival nation, potentially Luskan, in an attempted overthrow of Neverwinter. But when this failed, he was then jailed by his aunt and eventually sent to Revel's End. So that's kind of the conceit. It's very much a sort of Thorin Oakenshield, you know, prince in exile sort of an idea that eventually Poco would theoretically like to go back and retake Neverwinter. Their only they actually have two relationships. I didn't put the other one on here. They have a relationship to 858, Squee the Goblin, but they also have a relationship to 669, who we will talk about in just a second. So that's Poco. That's the kind of cleric of the group, and like there is definitely some narrative there. We're hopefully gonna explore some of that, right? Does once he escapes Revel's End, you know, do they send assassins after him? Like, what is the Queen Regent's response to knowing that, you know, their royal heir is running around up there somewhere? Next up, we have prisoner 931. 931 is probably the most basic character in the party. Their actual name is Novak the Frantic, which I'm not sure why they're called the Frantic, but okay. It feels like it came from a generator, but we'll see. They are a half-orc fighter. Their secret is that they are a pirate cannibal. They were a member, according to the secret, they were a member of the crew of a pirate ship called the Dark Duchess. To be clear, I did not write this one. This one was in the adventure, so you can't blame me for putting pirates in. That basically gets the terror style frozen in ice in the far north, right? And as the crew begins to starve, they start to turn towards extreme measures to stay alive, and things get kind of bleak, right? And the conceit is that if you draw this secret, you are the only survivor of the Dark Duchess's crew, right? Trying to, so you know that the ship is still out there, and you know that it has its treasure on board, but for whatever reason, you couldn't pull it out. They basically chose a modified version of this. They didn't really like the idea of being a pirate because they specifically wanted to play the samurai subclass.
And so I said, well, what if you were a prisoner on board the pirate ship? And he kind of made an argument, well, wouldn't they eat me first? I'm like, well, they might try to, but if you were strong enough, you might be able to defend yourself. The book could smell my salty beard. Yeah, exactly, Hunter. It knew that I was going to put pirates in here somehow. So the conceit is that he was born in the city of Luskan. He worked as a sailor for much of his life, including aboard the whaling vessel the Bloody Tub, which we'll come back to in a second. Eventually, though, his ship was captured by pirates of the Dark Duchess, and he was held as their prisoner. The ship eventually ran aground in the ice, and its crew began to starve. Only Novak survived, but was captured by the prison ship en route to Revel's End. So he is the most recently acquired prisoner. The conceit is that he wandered out from the ship and eventually flagged down a passing vessel who is basically the invisible hand, the prison ship, who apprehended him and is bringing him to Revel's End. Is that because he's a pirate? Is that because he's just another person? Like, it's unclear. The people running Revel's End are not particularly morally upstanding, so there is some element of his innocence here for sure. Great. His relationships, he has relationships with two other characters, neither of whom we've met yet, 669 and 387, who were all crew aboard the Bloody Tub. 387 was the whaling ship's captain, and 669 was just another whaler beside 931. So those three characters have a relationship. It actually ended up being like a weird triangle where 931 knew 669, and 669 knew 387, and 387 knew 931, right? So it was like a little triangle. Great. That brings us to 669, who's yet to be named, but I think is probably the most interesting character in terms of what I can do narratively with them. Their character is a lizard folk ranger, but their secret that they picked was reincarnation. So this is one in the book that I modified a little bit. The conceit here is that you died and were recently reincarnated in a new body. Reincarnate is a druid spell, and there's a chance that you get reincarnated as an animal or another type of humanoid, or sometimes even a fae creature, right? In the book, you remember everything about your life, and you're just now living in this new body. In my version, I said, I like the idea that you don't remember who you were. You have no memory of your previous life, but you know you died, and you know you were reincarnated. So they basically like wake up naked in the spine of the world mountains, trying to figure out who they are and where they came from. They do have these visions, these nightmares of how they died, drowning in a frozen lake. But that is about it, and you roll for that. You roll for what fate you basically met and why you were reincarnated. They were reincarnated by a druid, an NPC that we'll bring in at some point, but they don't even know that because the druid, for whatever reason, was not around when they kind of came to. So they were once a human. They died in Icewind Dale and were reincarnated as a lizard folk. But they have no memory of their former life. During that time, they worked as a drifter and a mercenary, even once aboard a whaling ship. But all the while, they were haunted by visions of their death, drowning in a frozen lake. I don't have a point here about the crime, but they were imprisoned for, in a drunken state, they attacked and harassed an important person in 10 towns and was sent to Revel's End as punishment. Great. Love that. So then they have a bunch of relationships. So we have 931 and a 387, or both crewmen aboard the Bloody Tub. We're going to talk about 387 in just a bit, but the conceit with 561, with Poco, the kobold, is that he knew 669 before he reincarnated. Possibly this character was involved in the coup. So I'm thinking that potentially... I was thinking that maybe they did run around Icewind Dale, but I wonder if they were actually in the city of Luskan, because my instinct is that they basically were an important person in Luskan, the power trying to overthrow Neverwinter, right? And that they somehow died in the coup, or they had to flee to Icewind Dale, and then they died there. Yeah, I think that maybe makes more sense if they're still in Icewind Dale for that. But I like the idea that they are originally from Luskan. Their sort of human form is from Luskan. And they were someone high rank, some important person, right? Who, when the coup went bad, maybe the city of Luskan cut their ties from, the rogue prince or whatever, and decided to send them north to Revel's End as punishment for this attempted takeover of the city. Great. That is 669. And then lastly, probably the second most interesting character is Prisoner 387. 387 drew as their secret the doppelganger, the shape changer secret. Basically, they are not who they claim to be. They are a doppelganger or a shape changer impersonating the person they currently are, right? Though for what reason is entirely up to them. So my hit was they ended up with a relationship to 669, the lizard folk, and I liked the idea of the shape changer impersonating the original form of the person who was reincarnated, right? So for whatever reason, they are walking around pretending to be the original form of 669, right? Their original body for their own reasons, which we'll talk about in a second. But 669 doesn't know that because they lost all their memory. So they've been hanging out and interacting with basically themselves or someone posing as themselves, and they have no memory of that, right? Maybe there's something faintly familiar about them. Maybe they can't quite put their finger on it. Maybe it's someone they think they might have known in their previous life, but it's actually, them, their original body, their original identity, but it's actually a changeling. Now, why they're being imprisoned is because the changeling intentionally got them, 387, see, it's already confusing. 387 intentionally got themselves imprisoned, looking to kill someone who was already imprisoned in Revel's End. Now, I haven't talked to them about this yet, that could be a personal score, that could be a job, they could be basically like a hitman or an assassin sent here to do this, right? But then their relationships as such, they served as a captain aboard the Bloody Tub, from 669, with 669 and 931, right? So they basically like impersonated the captain of this ship, which makes sense if their cover identity is from Luskin, the city of sails, this kind of piratical, quarrelsome nation. And that they do have a relationship with I had this backwards. They don't have a relationship. Ooh, they would actually have a relationship then with Poco. Right? With 561. Yeah, they would have that as well. Okay. If they are impersonating someone who was involved in the coup. 561. Poco might recognize them as the spearhead of the coup in Neverwinter. So almost every character, maybe with the exception of what's their number? Of 931, is connected in some way to this attempted coup of Neverwinter. That's kind of like almost the original sin of the campaign. So I could give them all lawyers. Yeah, that's interesting. Let's talk about Revel's End actually before we get into the specifics of how do we interconnect these relationships. Actually, you know what? We'll do relationships first. Corrupt guards for sure. Yeah, you know what? Let's talk about Revel's End. Let's dive in here for just a second. So Revel's End is this prison, right? It's like a panopticon, and it's run by the Lord's Alliance. It's kind of usually a place where they send spies, but I've, again, found that to be a little bit boring. I wanted to replace it with a slightly more interesting group of people that run it that are a little bit more morally suspect. Not that the Lord's Alliance couldn't be morally suspect, but there's another villain group that I think makes more sense with 669's backstory, somebody that he might have antagonized in his sort of drunken state. So I'm going to jump over here. I believe they're in, I believe that they are in a different part of the adventure. Boy, here we go. Yep, the Black Swords. Okay. The Black Swords, the Knights of the Black Sword, are a secret society of cultists devoted to Levistus, the archdevil who rules Stygia, the sixth layer of the Nine Hells, from the confines of an ice prison from which he cannot escape. So they are basically in control of the town of Caer Dineval, and they're this like knightly order. I kind of liked the idea that they also maybe were the ones who run the prison, right, if it's this knightly order. So they still appear to be a good law-abiding organization, right? But they are actually this cult to Levistus. Let me read a little bit more about them here. Most of the cultists are Icewind Dale natives who would have perished in the wilderness had Levistus not intervened on their behalf. The cultists' stories are all the same. The archdevil reached out to them in their minds as they were freezing to death, offering a second chance at life in exchange for their absolute devotion.
After they agreed to follow Levistus, a pale glow caught their eye in the snow nearby, leading to the discovery of a sword-shaped amulet of Chardolin. Interesting. Chardolin is an important material. It's kind of the unobtainium of this adventure, and it is a sort of like demonically infused crystal that is found a lot in Icewind Dale. Each of these amulets has an inner radiance that provides warmth and aid, protecting its wearer against the cold while guiding them safely back to civilization. Once its wearer reaches 10 towns, the talisman loses its inner radiance, yet the cultists keep the amulets as signs of their devotion to the Archduke of Stygia. See Chardolin Amulets sidebar. The Knights of the Black Sword have members scattered throughout 10 towns. They welcome new members and answer to Levistus, who speaks to them infrequently using a powerful form of cross-planar telepathy. Levistus has recently called upon them to help another of their master's disciples, an albino tiefling wizard named Avarice, achieve her goals. Okay, we'll talk about the wizards maybe a little bit later. Even though they find her demanding, and difficult to live with, they dare not defy her. Levistus has warned the Knights of the Black Sword that Duergar are plotting the destruction of 10 towns. He believes the Duergar are acting on behalf of Asmodeus, the Lord of the Hells, and his infernal jailer, but has not shared this information with the cult. The cult's oldest living member, Hethel, a peg-legged shield dwarf who has lost her right foot to frostbite, hates Duergar, as most dwarves do. Great, racism. She has convinced the other cult members to forge alliances with anyone willing to oppose the Duergar, including stray bands of adventurers. The Care serves as the cult's headquarters. The cult's presence is the worst-kept secret in Care Dinaval, though few locals ever speak of it. Great. So I might change that a little bit. I do like the idea of a knightly order. I do like the idea that they're devoted to Levistus. I like the notion that they are basically meant to they're almost like the Night's Watch, right? That they are here to protect people against the cold. And maybe they are based out of Care Dinaval, but they, took over Revel's End, and now they run Revel's End, and maybe they have they make a specific point that they have members scattered throughout 10 towns. So, basically making inroads to the other towns. So let me make a little point here about the swords. Alan says, one of them could have a son who's growing up without their father on the outside, who's, about to end up in prison themselves. Yeah, maybe once they get out of prison, they'll realize that they don't know how to hack it in the real world, and they'll try to get themselves imprisoned again. Because they've been, they don't know how to socialize anymore. They don't know, they've been socialized for prison. Okay, a cult of Levistus, the Knights of the Black Sword, pose as a gruff but good aligned order of rangers and knights and paladins who protect 10 towns against the cold. In truth, they are a infernal cult. The one thing they don't talk about here is, how does this help Levistus? Who Knights of the Sword pose as who worship Levistus and seek something that could free him from his bonds. They outwardly rule Care Dinaval, one of the 10 towns, but they also run Revel's End and have inroads into several of the other towns. So my idea was that they run the prison, right? And maybe it's even like a re-education thing where the idea is that you go to prison and you can choose to serve the knights, once you kind of make it through the training course or whatever. There could be a fight in the prison weight room, with barbells and stuff. Yeah, we'll see. I don't think it's that kind of prison, unfortunately. While they outwardly rule Care Dinaval. I don't know why they outwardly rule Care Dinaval, but they also run Revel's End. Revel's End. The knights offer membership in exchange for a shorter prison sentence. Offer the prisoners membership in the order. Gives the party a means to escape if their own means absolutely fail. Okay, I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. I want to go back and talk about the characters. I maybe should have started there. But that's who I think is in charge of the prison. It's more of a Castle Black situation, but if the Night's Watch were, you know, a corrupt cult. Yeah, that's cool. Alan says, a prison riot, that could be the escape cover. The Ice Maiden's whole plan to spring them is based around engineering a riot to take place on a certain day. That's cool. We will talk about that plot in just a second, because there's one character we need to involve that is an NPC, but I think something like that could absolutely work. So let's talk about these interrelationships very quickly. So I kind of want to figure out, like, what is this timeline of this overthrow of Neverwinter? Because it kind of feels like if so many characters are tied to Luskan and Neverwinter, we almost have to go there at some point, right? Maybe towards the end of the campaign, or as like a break from Icewind Dale. So if we say that, I'm just going to do a timeline. Okay, so Neverwinter coup. Because at some point I will have to go back to the players and ask them some questions about stuff, right? How do we tie these things together in a way that makes sense to them? But a lot of the details I feel like are kind of mine to determine in terms of like names and places and timelines and things. So prisoner number 561. 561 stands to inherit the throne of Neverwinter. Actually, okay, let's do this. Neverwinter is an island nation, kind of Iceland style. Neverwinter is an island nation similar to Iceland, but that is almost a tropical paradise thanks to all its volcanic activity. Run by kobolds who worship a slumbering dragon beneath the volcano. It has never been conquered or invaded as the dragon awakes to defend the island. It is nonetheless a juicy target for nearby powers. For control of Neverwinter would control most of the shipping, would allow someone to tax and control all shipping out of Icewind Dale. This is something Luskan has lusted after for centuries. The most recent heir, prisoner 561. Let's see. The last monarch, prisoner 561's parent, died when their only child was too young to inherit the throne, and thus the power fell to their sister. 561's aunt. As the Queen Regent, she holds the realm. She held the realm until 561 came of age. But in truth, she desired the throne for herself, seeking a means when her attempt to imprison her nephew on the eve of his birthday, eve of his majority, failed. 561 fled Neverwinter became a wandering vagrant for many years. During his travels across the desert, he fell into the faith of Anubis, god of order, who promised to set everything aright. Great. He's specifically drawn to Anubis, he said, because he wanted a god of like order and law. The notion being that he thought that like, or the player thought that they would be drawn to that because Anubis might like set things back, right? That like they're supposed to like you were supposed to inherit. There's an inherent like law and order to the universe, and it has been disrupted. Very kind of fate type shit. I might turn on a fan. I'm getting a little sweaty. I'm gonna go grab a fan. I'll be back in like 5 seconds. So sorry. I am back. I had a big flurry of texts that I had to deal with. Can you guys hear the fan? Is it too noisy? Let me just see what the audio looks like. Oh, it's not too bad. Okay, cool. I had another fan on earlier, and that was like really catching on the mic, so I tried a different one. Beautiful. Some chat, so I was gone. 387's target is the warden, not a prisoner. Yeah, that's cool. I like that idea. Excellent. Audio's clean. Beautiful. So popular. No, it was, we're trying to figure out what to do for food for our D&D session tonight. People are discussing what's the best option. Great. Thanks for catching me on that. All right, where were we? We were talking about the timeline here. I just want to get this nailed down. That way I know what happened. However, he eventually fell into the hands of the city of Luskin. Specifically, they're like Prince Reaver, right? Like something like that, where like it's a very, in the Forgotten Realms, it's kind of like the city of sails. It's this like nautical piratey city. Again, that's how it's done in the book, but just leave me alone. The Prince Reaver has like an eye towards conquering Neverwinter for Luskin, right? Think like a Sir Francis Drake or Sir Walter Raleigh, kind of like a famous crown-sanctioned explorer, right? Prince Reaver, conspiring together, they sought to invade Neverwinter and put 561 on the throne. To do this, they hired infamous assassin Squee the Impaler, hired an infamous assassin Squee the Impaler to, whatever, we'll just do, I gotta get these numbers in my head, that's the problem, that's why I don't want to use their names. Probably the numbers is a dumb idea, but I kind of thought it was fun. 858. They hired infamous assassin 858 to kill the Queen Regent. Perhaps as Regent, she's the one who can awaken the dragon. Great. The coup ultimately failed. And the coup ultimately failed, and Poco was captured. Coup ultimately failed. 561. 561 was captured. 858 and the Prince Reaver both escaped. Both assassin PCs are tasked with killing the same target in the jail. It is awkward. They have to sort it out. Yeah, I don't hate that idea. I mean, I think one of the assassins is being sent there is actually imprisoned, but I don't remember what crime they have. So maybe it's better to say, yeah, that they are also there on a job. Yeah, I actually don't hate that at all, Alan. I think that's pretty good. The Prince Reaver both escaped. The Prince Reaver was sent into exile in Icewind Dale for his crime. One assassin's there to kill the other one. Yeah, I don't want to like pit the party against each other. It's a cool idea though. I would do it in like a story, but probably not with kid PCs. The prince was sent into exile in Icewind Dale for his crime. You know, like the state like basically like denounced him. Icewind Dale for his crime. So I'm trying to figure out, because the Prince Reaver is 669, but before he turns into a lizard folk, right? He ends up drowning. Let's see. Poco is held for a few years. 561 is held in prison for 2 years before the regent decides simply to have him shipped to Revel's End. Perhaps she finally lays eggs of her own and decides she doesn't need him anymore, but can't kill him for cultural reasons. Kind of a Targaryen kinslaying thing, right? So the question is, if the Prince Reaver is sent into exile in Icewind Dale, how does he die? And then why does the assassin take over his identity and briefly run this whaling ship, right? That's the question. Why does 387 take over his identity? That's the part I think we're missing. So it has to happen before the Prince Reaver dies, I guess, right? Or there's like a reason to because if the other assassin can't also be a part of the coup, why would they have two assassins? How would they both fail, right? So the Prince Reaver goes into exile, and while in exile, he meets this doppelganger. Ooh, is the doppelganger sent to kill him? Yeah, I wanted to do that. Yes, that's what I wanted to do. So while in exile, the Queen Regent sends her own assassin, 387, to kill the Prince Reaver. He does so, but in the process takes over the prince's identity. Yeah, at the time, the Prince Reaver was captaining a whaling ship called the Bloody Tub, living in hiding. The assassin kills him, pushing him into the freezing sea, and takes over his identity. There you go. A druid fishes out the Prince Reaver. A druid fishes out the Prince Reaver and reincarnates him as a lizard folk with no memory of his former life. Yeah, there we go. Okay. See? So now all we need is who is the Queen Regent. If 387 is an assassin for the Queen Regent of Neverwinter, who is, like, why are they trying to kill the warden or a prison guard or something, right? Like, what's that about? If Revel's End is run by these if Revel's End is run by the Knights of the Black Sword, right? Like, is there someone high up in the Knights of the Black Sword that the Queen Regent wants killed for some reason? Like, because my instinct is that it's a prisoner, right, rather than a warden. I don't hate the idea of it being the warden. I would have to figure out, like, what is it about that? Because a prisoner could be anybody, right? But the minute that you say that it's a member of the prison, like, establishment, then you have to have a motivation there. And I don't know how Neverwinter, this, like, foreign power, like, what's their interest in the Knights of the Black Sword? Like, maybe they want to take over the prison, but, like, why? Like, why does Neverwinter care? If it's another prisoner, that makes a lot more sense. Oh no, I don't hate it. I think it's cool. I'm just thinking, right? I don't think it's a bad idea. I just think sometimes it gets, like, you know, there's so many ins and outs, you got to keep it moving. Because I don't have an answer for who the prisoner would be either, right? Like, I don't have an answer one way or the other, so no worries. They're all good ideas. I'm not trying to say any of the ideas don't work or aren't cool. Just got to figure out what's the best one. So we'll come back to this. Like, the 387 is now still posing as the Prince Reaver. Still potentially under orders from the Queen Regent. Hired or infiltrating the prison. What if it's this? I mean, what if it's, like, rather than the Queen Regent, took a contract to kill the prison warden because... Ooh, financial crimes? That's interesting. I was going to say maybe took a contract to kill the prison warden from the Knights of the Black Sword. That whoever is running the prison has kind of gone rogue, right? But I don't hate the idea of it being an accountant. I just feel like the accountant is cool, but you'd have to figure out, like, what is the... Like, if it is someone that the Queen Regent imprisoned there and now wants killed, right? What can they learn beyond that they don't already know by not killing that person, right? Like, I think if it's the Knights of Levistus, or the Knights of the Black Sword, hiring them to kill one of the Knights of the Black Sword, there's an interesting internecine struggle there, right? That implies something else is going on. I don't hate the accountant. I just feel like we got to figure out what is the purpose narratively of them doing this. To kill the prison warden who's gone rogue. So a contract from the Knights of the Black Sword. Knights of the Black Sword. To kill the prison warden who's gone rogue. Infiltrated the prison. This is a horrible sentence. Just garbage. Great. Yeah, I think it's something like that. Maybe they don't know that the prison warden is actually... They don't know they were hired by the Knights of the Black Sword. Okay, cool. I think that's pretty good. I think as complicated as that all is, I mean, look at it, right? I think that's fine. Somebody else was also hired to kill the... I think 858 was also hired to kill the prison warden. Do they work together or do they compete? Yeah, see, this is what I'm saying. Your idea is good. Yeah, the Knights of the Black Sword are too afraid of confrontation. Assassination is the only way to not have a difficult conversation with their boss. Yeah, exactly, right? It's like rather than a performance review where we tell you that like, hey, we need you to get your numbers up a little bit, they just have you assassinated. I think it's like corporate policy inside the Knights of the Black Sword. That's very fun. Okay, cool. So that is the backstory, I think, on how they all tie in. The question is, what do people know and when? But I can send each individual player, and I usually do this for a campaign, like, these are the things you know, right? These are the truths about your character, things you've experienced, and then at some point they kind of have that moment where they compare notes. It's like, okay, well, I know that the Queen Regent did this, and I know that, you know, the Prince Reaver did that. Literally getting the axe. Hey-oh. There you go, David. It is funny, there's Queen Regent, Prince Reaver, right? They're very similar titles. I may come up with a different name than the Queen Regent. Who knows? We'll see. Okay, let's talk about the plot outline. So this is basically the point where, kind of going back to what Alan was saying about Auriel, the Frostmaiden. For those of you who don't know, kind of the premise of the adventure as written is that Icewind Dale, this kind of like northern Canada meets Siberia, sort of like almost Alaska-esque end-of-the-world region in Forgotten Realms, has fallen under a perpetual winter put in place by Auriel the Frostmaiden, who is the kind of goddess of cold and of winter, who for like big reasons in Forgotten Realms has made herself immortal and is now living on the mortal plane as this extremely powerful entity. It's fallen under this endless spell, and you know the people are kind of slowly being crushed to death under the endless cold and endless night of Auriel's sort of like hellscape. The party does a number of things. They kind of help out the individual towns with little side quests. There's a big plot in the middle about a Duergar warlord who tries to conquer Icewind Dale because now that there's no sun, you know, this sort of like underdark dwelling militaristic power can come to the surface and take over. And ultimately the like key to defeating her. Oh, great. Sildari says, I just started running this past Saturday. Yeah, how did you start, Sildari? Did you start with the hook in the beginning? Because I found that to be a little lackluster for my taste. I'm curious what your like inciting incident was. And then they, I think the like big reveal is that in order to stop her, you have to basically carve your way into this glacier that has a sort of Mountains of Madness style ancient Netherese city frozen in this glacier, and there's all kinds of crazy magic that you use to defeat Auriel. And that's kind of the general structure of it. So it's a little bit piecemeal in terms of like not having a huge overarching plot, but the idea is that each one of these little like mini narratives kind of tie into each other to make one sort of chain of the adventure. I wanted to put a through line through, which we'll talk about in just a second, that ties the characters a little bit more directly to Auriel. But let's go through what we know so far. Imprisoned aboard the Invisible Hand, bound for Revel's End, the characters meet Sefik Kalto and can plan their own escape attempt. Sefik Kalto is an important character in the book. It's basically one of your inciting incidents. Oh, great. The hook tied into one of the characters' backstory, and the call to adventure was easy for the bard to heed. Well, there you go then. Perfect. That worked out nice. Yeah, I'm not saying you can't make it work. Like, if it were, especially if your backstories line up well for that, great. But I always find it, like, I want something a little juicier to start off with. Maybe too juicy, if you look at all the weird mess that I have. But it's the kind of plot thing they can kind of slowly untangle over the course of the campaign. Great. Sefik Kalto is a character that features kind of their first villain that they meet. In the adventure, Sefik is a serial killer, basically someone who is blessed by Auriel and specifically hunts down and kills people who have evaded the lottery that 10 Towns does. 10 Towns is this little community of these 10... yeah, I about did a spit take when the cleric asked, can I worship Auriel? That's very cool. Yeah, what a fun way to do that. I mean, I love the drama of that. That's awesome. The 10 Towns are this little community of these like frontier towns working together in this like oppressive winter environment. And the idea is that several of them are basically doing a lottery where the loser of the winner of the lottery, kind of Shirley Jackson style, gets sacrificed to Auriel in an attempt to try to keep the winter from getting too bad, too severe. That's my understanding. I've heard about it. I've not actually read through it. But I know that Sefik Kalto is this serial killer who goes out on the streets and kills anyone who, like, dodges the lottery or gets out of the lottery, right? Kind of like Auriel's sort of avenger. So he's an important character, and he's a serial killer early on in the adventure, and I thought, boy, what a missed opportunity to have them escape from prison and not have Sefik Kalto be in prison with them, right? So rather than being just sort of like a random random caravan guard who gets blessed by Auril, in my version, Sefik was already a serial killer from some southern city-state, and is being shipped up to Rebel's End to await execution. At a critical moment in the escape, Auril reaches out to each character and offers them a power to help them escape. If they accept this gift, they gain a new power, but they are also in Auril's debt. Right, so the idea is you want to try to basically get them over a barrel during the prison escape. I'm not too worried about the prison escape being too easy or too hard, because prison escapes are one of those scenarios you can pretty easily engineer to go the way you need it to go. You know, you can look the other way on guard patrols. You can be very strict about stealth checks. Really depends on whether you need to turn the dial up or down on a prison escape. I find is pretty easy to do. So what I would like to do, ideally, they're inevitably going to try to escape, whether it's from the ship in the beginning or whether it's from the prison itself. And maybe that involves a riot, like Alan suggested. But the conceit is that Auril reaches out to the party and basically says, in a moment when they really need it, hey, if you need my help, I will give you my help, right? Sefik needs a pervy affectation. I'm not opposed to that. We gotta find out how pervy it is, because these are still for kids, but I like that idea a lot. Yeah, I'm curious how I'm gonna play them, right? Are they like sophisticated like Hannibal Lecter? Are they kind of sort of like kind of grody, like sort of a Heath Ledger, right? Like what's the tone here for Sefik? I'm not sure. But basically, if they accept the gift, they then are kind of in Auril's pocket, that she has given them this power, and she will continue to send them marching orders, right? That after they escape, they can make for civilization, in this case 10 towns, and along the way, they sort of receive new marching orders from Auril. Maybe they're all sent on the same mission, maybe they're sent on different missions, but she wants them to do different things with them, basically in exchange for the power. If they do those powers, right, or if they do those missions, then their powers increase. They get more abilities, but they get deeper and deeper into Auril's pocket. And their motivations on some level to stop her get less and less. Hopefully we will end up with a party where I would love to have a thing where the party individual members of the party don't know if they accept or deny Auril's gifts, right? Like I might start using Zoom so I can do little breakout rooms and have them get little messages from Auril to see whether or not they do or don't. And I want the suspicion of, did you accept it? Are you in Auril's pocket, to get higher and higher. It's really fine if none of them do it. Like that has to be okay, because they might just see through it and not accept it. But I'm hoping to offer it to them in positions where they are unconscious, or they are surrounded, or they're in moments where a power or an ability, like or divine intervention, could get them out of it, but then of course they're on the hook for it. It's kind of that thing where in Tomb of Annihilation, right, there's this death curse that basically hooks the party, that is affecting Chult, but then all the whole rest of the world. Basically anyone who came back from the dead begins to slowly deteriorate. Great adventure hook, I love that, very, very strong. But then they don't do anything with it. Right? It's just like, this is a thing happening to some NPCs in the background. There are no important characters that you meet or that you're even motivated by that have the death curse, right? I mean, I understand mechanically why they can't give it to the PCs, but it really feels like the hook there is that each one of you has come back from the dead. Right? Okay, cool. Awesome. Why and how? Like, that's such a good hook already. And then you are each personally bound up in the curse, right? Like, you will die if you don't get this solved. There are mechanical reasons why, because the curse is so nasty you wouldn't want to do that. But it was something I did when I ran it. Instead of a death curse, I kind of got rid of a Sararak, and I know that's crazy, and just did the Yuan-Ti as the villains in Chult, and it was a nightmare plague, basically, right? It was that Dendar the Night Serpent was putting these terrible dreams in everyone's minds, and everyone was suffering for it. No one was sleeping properly. Very Perdido Street Station, right? But then you're able to give it to all the characters, and you're able to say, like, no, this is the way in which this thing is affecting you personally. Here's your vested interest in stopping these nightmares, right? That are affecting everyone in Chult. So I kind of wanted to do something similar where the party is on the hook for any bad things that happen as a result of working for Auril, right? That if they do it, they can get momentary power and they can survive. But if they don't do it, eventually she sort of comes after them or punishes them or tries to basically call back in her favor. That's kind of the idea.
But what I don't know much about is the actual structure of the adventure beyond that point. So that might be the next thing we jump into. It's about 3 o'clock right now. I have about another 50 minutes or so to talk about this. I just want to, I just want to try to beat out the next couple of plot beats once they escape. So obviously they will try to flee, or we can also look at Revel's End. Let's maybe look at Revel's End first, actually, just from a mechanical standpoint, and go from there. So I may get a little bit of lag here as I move around in D&D Beyond. It doesn't like it when I move pages, but Revel's End. I remember thinking Revel's End was a little bit underwhelming, that it's like a cool design, but there's not a lot of narrative here. So this is maybe some ways we could improve Revel's End. We could kind of brainstorm some of that stuff. Whether that means a weight room, where people can use barbells, that kind of thing. So let's read it. Revel's End is a panopticon, a prison configured in such a way that the activities of the prisoners can be closely monitored through a central location. Situated on the frigid Midri coast, the frigid, misty coast of the Sea of Moving Ice, the prison is a single-story structure topped with battlements. Rising from the core of the panopticon is a tower that holds the prison's administrative offices and guard barracks. Both the prison and the tower are carved out of a tall, blade-shaped rock that rises above the sea cliffs. This rock, called the Windbreak, shields the tower against the brutal winds that sweep down from the Reghed Glacier. I always hated that name, Reghed Glacier. I actually think there is a pronunciation guide. Let's get that name correct. I don't like that it's a one-story thing. That feels weird. It feels like it should be a tower, right? Pronunciation guide. I think it's here in the beginning. Sorry, I know it hates it when I scroll. Adventure flowchart. There you go. It's all about exploring. Pronunciation guide. Duergar, Grimskala. It's not here. Reghed? I guess that must be it. Reghed. Some of these names are crazy. This is the Netherese Necropolis is spelled Ythryn. Ethrin is how it's pronounced. Ethrin. They do a nice job of making it sound like weird and alien. That's disappointing. I assumed Reghed would be in there. Reghed sounds weird to me. It doesn't sound cool. I might change the name of the glacier. So let's do a list of changes. More than one story. Perhaps. Change the name of the glacier. Reghed sounds weird. Okay. One can approach Revel's End by land, sea, or air. A pier allows prisoners to be taken from ships up to an elevator to the prison, and a mooring dock at the top of the tower allows prisoners to be delivered by airship as well. They're coming by regular ship. Revel's End is controlled by the Lord's Alliance. We're going to skip all of that because we're not doing that. Each member of the Lord's Alliance assigns one representative to Revel's End. The Absolution Council is a cool idea, but no thank you. It's a cool picture. I love the big windbreak. I love the three-dimensionality of it. I know Ack Inc. is doing a lot of stuff at Revel's End right now. Because again, it's a cool location, but the adventure I don't think does that much. Involving the characters. The characters might be lured to Revel's End by one of the tales or quests that at the start of the chapter that have to do with Valish Gaunt. This villain last appeared in Legacy of the Crystal Shard, a published adventure also set in Icewind Dale. Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden, presupposes that Valish Gaunt's plot to take over 10 towns was thwarted, and that he has been incarcerated at Revel's End for a few years before the start of the story. The characters might also have come to Revel's End hoping to book passage on a ship. Such vessels are known to bring prisoners and supplies to the prison. A ship could take them to Ariel's Island, see Chapter 5, or allow them to flee the far north altogether. The prison, hewn from stone, has 20-foot-high outer walls and a flat 20-foot-high ceilings throughout. Additional information about the prison is summarized below. Doors and hatches, arcane lock spells, okay, magically heated. Lighting is continual flame. 75 prison guards, oof. Work 8-hour shifts. 2/3 of the garrison is off duty, resting in area wherever. Alan says cell blocks could be a way to organize where characters are / what prisoners do there. Like the machine shop is in block E, the library is in block C. Yeah, I think that's interesting because that's a lot more what an actual prison how it would operate. This is like a fantasy prison where you just sit in your cell. So maybe if we are going to add other layers, that might be the way to do it, right? Is to say that like, okay, floor 1 has the machine shop, floor 2 has the. I might even do like a not a brickyard, like a stone yard, right? Where you just like split rocks. Yeah, that's cool. I'm not opposed to that.
Each level is a cell block. Each cell block has a unique thing. Has a unique feature. A library, a yard, a shop. You can get cool prison tattoos from a guy in block A. Let's see. All prisoners in Revel's End are identified by a number. This simple protocol makes it harder for prisoners to identify one another and helps keep them on an equal footing. Prison personnel commit these numbers to memory, and the records of all prisoners, past and present, are stored in Area R22. Each inmate wears a uniform that consists of a hoodless robe without pockets, leather slippers without laces, and cloth undergarments. While outside their cells, they wear manacles on their wrists and ankles. Approaching the prison, little box text. In the north, can see the prison's north entrance on the top of a 160-foot-high cliff with a pier protruding from its base. A giant wooden crane stands nearby and a wooden scaffold. The prison has 4 guard towers, and 3 guards in cold weather clothing are stationed atop each one. Wisdom perception checks for guards to determine if they notice something. Guards in the tower, blah, 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 getting inside. So this is assuming that you are, like, approaching. Like, if you're not a prisoner, right? One of the guards to the meeting room, where the warden greets them soon thereafter. The warden tries to find out why the characters are at Revel's End and decides whether to help them or not. If the characters fail to provide a satisfactory reason for their visit, the warden sees their weapons and animals are returned to them before throwing them out. Legitimate reasons for coming to Revel's End include the following. The characters seek shelter, the warden will grant them temporary accommodations for up to 2 days and 2 nights, and the characters receive 3 meals a day during their stay. The characters wish to meet with the prisoner. The warden can facilitate such a meeting by having the prisoner brought. See, this is what's weird, is that the warden doesn't seem to have any information about them. Oh, it says see area R21. Let's go there. Warden's quarters. Okay, here we go. Arcane lock on this door can be opened only by the warden. Beyond the door is a comfortable bedchamber lit by a continual flame spell that can be dimmed or brightened by uttering a command word, Vadra. The Warden of Revel's End is Marta Marthanis, a lawful good human mage who speaks Common, Draconic, Dwarvish, and Orc, and has a calm, unflappable disposition. She wears a red robe with gold trim and keeps a ring of 7 tiny keys hanging from it in one pocket. A ring with 7 tiny keys, gotcha. 1 key unlocks the Warden's chest. Blah, blah, blah. Is secretly a member of the Harpers. Okay, a faction that works behind the scenes to keep power out of the hands of evildoers. In her current position, she works to keep some of the Sword Coast's worst malefactors behind bars. So far, the Warden has managed to conceal her Harper affiliation from everyone else in the prison, but she has an unusual problem that she can't hide as easily. Lodged inside her is the spirit of a deceased adventuring companion. Okay, weird. A lawful good shield dwarf fighter named Vlax Brawn Anvil. Jesus, compound dwarf names. Listen, I do it too, but Brawn Anvil sucks. The spirit of Vlax takes control of Warden Marthanis once or twice a day, each time for an hour or so. While under its control, the Warden can't cast her prepared spells, speaks only Dwarvish, and occasionally indulges Vlax's vice for ale and spirits. She also becomes moody and temperamental, though never resorts to violence without good cause. Warden Marthanis knows that to rid herself of Vlax's spirit, she must visit the Brawn Anvil Crypts and Gauntlgrim, a dwarven fortress under Mount Houtenau near Neverwinter. Only there can the spirits of Vlax's kin persuade Vlax to join them in the afterlife. The Warden refuses to make the journey, however, because she can't bear to lose all contact with Vlax. The Warden has made her affliction known to the prison guards and Absolution Council members, and they have grown accustomed to her personality changes and bouts of drunkenness. I mean, like, that's interesting, but, like, what are you supposed to do with that? That's weird. I don't want that shit. Like, it's interesting. Like, I'm not saying it's like a bad character concept, but it goes nowhere, right? There's no like proposed solution or anything like that. It's just like, sometimes I'm this guy. Does Vlax know something? Is Vlax like, yeah, that's very weird. Okay, so let's talk about this warden then. Actually, maybe want to keep reading and see if there's anything else here we can use before we start developing anything. But I do like the idea of them being run by the Knights of the Black Sword. So let's go back up. Here's the map. Okay, high alert. When a matter of concern is brought to her attention, the warden decides whether to place the prison on high alert. Circumstances that warrant taking such an action include prisoner revolt and escape, the approach of an unfamiliar ship, a dragon sighting, or an attack. Yeah, it is kind of oof, right, Sildar? I don't think it's bad, I just don't think it does anything. Like, how do I use that? Speaking the command word Maristo, the warden, and only the warden, can put the prison on high alert with the following effects. For 1 minute, the sound of a klaxon blares through the prison, and all continual flame spells take on a reddish hue. That's cool. I like that. All the lights turn red. The guards in Area 19 don their armor, arm themselves, and move to Area 18. The warden does the same and commands the garrison from there. Members of the Absolution Council retreat to R20. The warden and all prison guards gain the benefit of a sea invisibility spell. That's really cool. I like that a lot. Neat. So there's the map. Okay, I see. So the middle sections are the different towers. Yeah, I don't hate that. Although, again, I think a panopticon works best if it's a tower, right? Why it's weird to have a panopticon on the bottom and then a tower that goes up. Yeah, that's strange. Okay, pier. Ship's dock here, sturdy wooden elevator, 3 guard rooms. Okay, hospital, stables. These all seem pretty basic. Let's jump to the counselor's quarters. These 10 rooms are furnished identically. Each contains a bed, a desk with matching chair, a claw-footed chest, and wall hooks for hanging clothes. The continual flame spell that illuminates each room can be suppressed or returned to its normal light level by uttering a command word, lights. These rooms are set aside for the 10 members of the Absolution Council, though only 3 rooms are currently in use. The other 7 members of the council are absent, so the warden is free to let visitors use the spare rooms. The 3 members of the Absolution Council are at Revel's End currently. Councillor Voss Anderton. Voss represents the city of Neverwinter. He is a lawful neutral human non-combatant who has a precise, lawyerly way of speaking. He takes his role seriously and never misses a council meeting or parole hearing. He votes with his head, not his heart, and always carefully weighs the ramifications of committing a prisoner's sentence. Councillor Jill Torbo. Jill represents the city of Baldur's Gate. She is a neutral halfling non-combatant who loathes her job. She has no sense of humor and a habit of sighing deeply when her patience is tested. She likes giving others the benefit of the doubt, however, and perhaps as an act of dissent, and votes yes on commutations. Boy, I've never seen that word spelled before. More often than not. Councillor Kriv Nerixius. Kriv represents the town of Daggerford. He is a lawful good dragonborn non-combatant of silver dragon ancestry. He hopes to impress the Duchess of Daggerford by doing a good job. He has no compassion for criminals and always votes no on commutations. Okay. 6 cooks, off-duty cooks. Okay, so the Absolution Council, I don't know, a little weedy for me. I almost would prefer it that it's like a weird, they do experiments there or something like that, right? Like if it is run by this cult, by these Knights of the Black Sword, then it feels like you have to have some kind of suspicious rooms. Okay, guard towers. There's an armory with a bunch of weapons, courtyard, meeting room, storeroom, privy, hexagon. Continual flame, the cells. Okay. Prisoners are kept in these unlit cells behind barred gates that can be opened only from area R18. The gates are too secure to be forced open using brute strength or weapons, and magical attempts to open or bypass them are thwarted by permanent anti-magic fields. Yeah, fair enough. Each field encompasses one cell and its gate. Spells and other magical effects, except those created by an artifact or a deity, are suppressed in an anti-magic field and can't protrude into it. While an effect is suppressed, it doesn't function, but the time it spends suppressed counts against its duration. Bolted to the back wall of each cell is an iron bunk bed with a thin mattress atop it and a waste bucket nearby. Prisoners take their meals in their cells. Each of the 24 cells can hold 1 or 2 prisoners. Roll 40-12 to determine the number of prisoners currently incarcerated at Revel's End. Give each one an identification number and distribute them in the cells as you see fit. Numbers are assigned in order in which the prisoners arrive and are never reused. That's not the case for me, because I had them roll randomly and they're all different ones. Numbers are reused. numbers are reused once a prisoner is freed or dies. The longest serving prisoner is currently incarcerated at Revel's End is prisoner 6, and the newest one is 299. Characters who wish to speak with Valish God must arrange a meeting with prisoner 237. To add some details to the inmate's role on the prisoner's table and choose entries that interest you, If a prisoner's game statistics become necessary, choose an appropriate stat block from Appendix B of the Monster Manual and remove armor, weapons, and other gear. Noble convicted of slave trading, a spy convicted of espionage, assassin or noble convicted of conspiracy to murder members of a noble family, famous adventurer convicted of reckless endangerment, that's fun, spellcaster convicted of using magic to influence others, leader of a thieves guild convicted of multiple crimes. Yeah, I think those are all pretty cool, pretty generic, but I think that works. Surveillance hub. Hexagonal room is the base of the prison's central tower. 7 guards are there. One sits at a console south of the staircase. The other guards watch the prisoners, whom they can observe through a 4-foot tall, 1-foot wide arrow slits in the walls. Hanging on the walls between the arrow slits are 50 sets of iron manacles that guards use to bind prisoners' wrists and ankles. The console is a magical device bolted to the floor that resembles a small desk with a slanted top. It's a console. It is a large object with AC 15, 18 hit points, blah, blah, blah. It's the following magical properties. 24 switches on the console open and close the gates of the prison cells. A 25th master switch opens and closes all the gates at once. Light control, a brass dial on the console controls the light level, blah, 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 and a loudspeaker speaks into a flaring brass protrusion resembling the bell of a trumpet, while pressing on the button on the console can broadcast their voice through the prison. Sure. Guard barracks have guards. The Hall of Absolution. The floor of this hall is 120 feet above the prison roof. Oh, wow. Okay. Very high up. The spiral staircase connects the room to the other levels of the tower. Narrow windows line the outer walls. A long, slightly curved table takes up much of the room. 11 chairs are situated behind the table. The middle chair has no special adornments, while the others have banners hanging over their high backs, each one emblazoned with the crest of the Lord's Alliance member. Banners hanging on the walls display the Alliance's emblem, a golden crown on a red field. Members of the Absolution Council gather here to weigh the merits of releasing prisoners. So, oh, you know what? I know we said the warden, and then it's internecine. I wonder if posing as the Prince Reaver intentionally imprisoned themselves to kill someone, maybe a former comrade, maybe a contract that is about to be released on good behavior, right? That, like, then the Absolution Council becomes important because they're about to get released, right? They have to do it quickly. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know who or why, but we can figure it out. Okay, that's the warden. Warden's office. Warden's office, 5 locked wooden cabinets. Cabinets contain ship cargo manifests and records of past deliveries. The records also include death certificates for prisoners who died while incarcerated. The cause of death is always given as natural, accidental, or unnatural with no details. That's spooky. A desk in the middle of the room has 10 financial ledgers and a locked side drawer. Pick the lock. Who cares? Why would you want to look at financial records, though? Like, what is this for? Ugh. This is a thing that they do a lot now in recent adventure designs, where they design these spaces that are deeply logical, but not especially narratively interesting, right? It's like, okay, here's this room, the warden's office, with the records of everyone who's died. That's cool. Is there anything in there? And they're like, ooh, the cause of death is always given as like natural, accidental, or unnatural with no details. Ooh, okay. Is there something I can learn from that? No. No prisoners have died that are worth noting here. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, why write that and then provide no context that I could use it? Like, I would have to invent something now if I wanted to use this cool detail. And they make a point about, like, their financial ledgers packed into a locked side drawer. The keys to the desk are in the warden's possession. A character with thieves' tools can use an action to try to pick the lock.
doing so with a successful DC 10 dexterity check. Okay, I've done that. Why would I do that? Right? Imagine being in the warden's office. Imagine being in the warden's office, picking the desk drawer, right? See, okay, the desk drawer is locked. Cool. I'm going to pick it. I succeed. It's a relatively easy lock. Got it. Open it up, pull out financial records. Ooh, okay. Why were they locking this? What's to hide in these financial records? Let me open them up and begin looking through, and you just discover that they're financial records. It's like signaling that this is important. Like, could you not, in the warden's thing, right? Like, this is very simple, but on the warden's page, could you not simply say that the warden is embezzling funds, right? They've been embezzling it for years, and they're hiding the proof of that in their desk. Okay, great. Then you have leverage over the warden. Let's say you want to free a prisoner or something. You can say, look at what we found, financial impropriety. It's not, I mean, and again, I just made that up off the top of my fucking dome, but like, why have this adventurer spirit thing, interesting, but irrelevant, and then have this unrelated? Like, what is the narrative like function of this? Why spend the time in your book to talk about this? Oh, hey, Nuker Wolf. Nuker Wolf says, no idea what's going on, but financial records, maybe they find someone that has died but is still active somewhere. Like, yeah, that's interesting, right? That somebody who's like running around is supposedly died in Revel's End. Troubling photos. Like, you could, again,